Okay, I am not, I
Yes,
think no need the picture. No, I will do the presentation. Okay, thank you very much for attending my lecture. Now, I think this subject, health, safety, environment, and quality management system, last time ISL introduced this part into the B paper, and there were very good response. I think more than 210 question papers I have to check. And I think that since this is in a different section, most of the students, they have answered this question. I am doing another 2 subjects as well. As a first subject, today 2 hours we try to do this part. Here I think ISL main objective is to give some awareness, but don't think no one will ask in detail about the each standard or anything. As a engineer, sometimes you may be a quality control engineer, maybe you are a health safety HSC engineer, or sometimes you may be occupational health and safety. But here main objective is to give a awareness on this particular subject as a engineer, since you are working with the society. Okay, here ISL expects to keep aware on ISO, SLS, HACCP, GMP, EQM, and 5S as a quality standards, quality management system. Then health, safety, and environmental aspects, accident in factories, sites, workplace, hazard identification and risk assessment, fire risk and control, environmental pollution control, waste management at work site, personal protective equipment, managing pandemic situation at the workplace. This is not only the COVID pandemic, this anything, like it's like a disaster management. Then laws and regulation related to the HSC, social responsibility and concerning managing projects. These are the content in the ISL B paper. And here I am trying to give you the brief awareness on these on these aspects. Okay. As an industry best practices, in here we are trying to learn about quality management systems. Normally we call it as QMS, means what the organization does to manage its processes or activities in order that its product or services meet the organization's objective. What is the main objective of the organization? That means to satisfy the customer's quality requirement. Main objective of any organization, if whether it's a private sector or the government sector, main objective is to satisfy the customer. Mainly customer. How to satisfy the customer means you have to satisfy the customer's quality. Otherwise, customer may not buy that product or services again, or maybe if there is any competitive product, definitely customer will go to the competitive product in next time. Second one is the complying to regulations. There are when you are producing a product, you have to comply with the regulations. And other thing is meeting environmental objectives. Previously, mainly concerned on the customer quality and regulations. Now everyone has to make the product by complying the environmental objectives as well. There are different organizations, ISO systems there, Sri Lanka standard systems there, hazard analytical critical control point, normally it is called as HACCP systems, then good manufacturing practices, GMP, total quality management, 5S. But there are more quality management systems, but here ISL expects you to learn about these quality standards, not in detail, maybe as a awareness, what kind of quality they are expecting in these quality management systems. Please keep in mind what are the objectives. Mainly, first objective is to satisfy the customer quality. Second one is to comply to regulations. Third one is to meet the environmental objectives. Normally, standard is a document established by a consensus that provide rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results. All this standard is a document. Everything, let's say if it's a SLS standard, SLS number is there, then the document is there. ISO is the same kind of thing. All the things are documented and well established. Another thing is standards cover everything from consumer products and services, construction, engineering, business, information technology, human services to energy and water utilities, the environmental, and much more. That means most of the standards. Sometimes in Sri Lanka, we don't have SLS standards for everything. Then we are referring these standards, British standards or the IEC standards or different standards. Let's say for some electrical engineering or maybe some technical equipment, we may refer IEC standard or BS standards. In Sri Lanka, we may not available that particular standard. It's acceptable to everyone if we are using the BS or IEC standard. Standards play an important role in everyday life. They may establish size or shape or capacity of a product processing system. They can specify performance of products or personnel. That means in a service industry, definitely the standards refers to the personnel who attend the service. They also can define terms so that there is no misunderstanding among those using the standard. That's the most important thing in the standard. Standard should not give misguidance. That means we should not interpret a standard in different ways. That's the most important thing, and that's the first thing I have made by consensus. That means normally these standards are accepted as unanimously. That's the main importance of having a standard. Then we'll go something regarding the standards. ISO standard. Normally ISO 9000 series is there. ISO 14,000 series are there. These are generic standards. Generic means that the same standard can be applied to any organization, large or small, whatever its product or services in any sector of activity. That means normally this is quality management system. If you are adopting ISO 9001 in your organization, it's a generic one. That means every organization have to comply with the same conditions, but maybe they apply in a different way. Let's say if an organization preparing food and if the other organization preparing some product, then their processes may be different, but principles will be same. Whether it's a business enterprise or a public administration or a government department, these generic standards can be applied no matter what the organization's scope of activity. If it wants to establish a quality management system, ISO 9001 gives the essential features. Normally ISO accredited organizations are there. If you want to get the ISO 9000 series or ISO 14,000, you have to apply through the ISO accredited organization. Then there will be an auditing function. So many procedure is there. They are adopting the quality. Normally ISO 9000 gives the quality management system. ISO 14,000 gives the environmental management system. Okay. Then ISO 9000 series for quality management system. If you want to look into the quality, then you have to apply, you have to get the ISO 9000. Quality refers to all those features of a product or service which are required by the customer. That's the main objective of the organization. That means quality management means what the organization does to ensure that its products or services satisfy the customer's quality requirements and comply with any regulations applicable to those products or services. Here, I told in a standard, main objective is to satisfy the quality, comply with the regulations and the environment, to meet the environment. According to the ISO, 2 series are there. That means ISO 9000 series for the quality management system and ISO 14000 series for the environmental management. Ultimately, if the organization is given with ISO 9000 and 14000 series, then automatically a consumer may think this product will be a quality product, but organization must adopt the sustainability of that particular. That means organization main objective is to sustain with that quality. That's the main issue in Sri Lanka. Most of the organizations, they are obtaining these quality management tools. That means they are adopting all these procedures, everything, but ultimate product having issues. Then, or otherwise the after sales services does not comply that kind of quality management principle. Then there may be complaints, so many things, but for the sustainability of any organization, whether it's a government or the private sector, you have to adopt the quality management system. And other main thing is you have to have a follow-up system to ensure that it is properly managed. That's the main thing. And also quality management system enhance the customer satisfaction and achieve continual improvement of its performance. That's the most important thing. Normally, when you produce a product, once it's consumed by the consumers, there could be complaints or the feedback from the consumers. Based on the feedback or the consumer, the organization should take action to improve the product. That's also part of the your quality management cycle. Okay, I will explain those things in later. In the ISO 14000 series for environmental management, this means what the organization does to minimize harmful effects on the environment caused by its activities. That's the main thing. Now everyone is concerned on the environmental emissions, maybe the solid waste, everything is there. Then ISO 14000, if you adopt the ISO 14000 environmental management system, that company must adopt these environmental mitigation to conform to applicable regulatory requirements and to achieve continual improvements of its environmental performance. Same way, if let's say if your company is discharging some effluent to the water stream, then if people around that industry, if they complain it, you should have a proper response to mitigate such kind of discharge, and that's the continual improvements of its environmental performance. Don't think these quality management systems are very rigid things. Everything you can adopt those changes, but ultimate framework you have to maintain. Okay. Then the SLS standards, whatever whether it's ISO, SLS, TQM, IS, whatever the quality management system, the basic principles are same, but only thing is for the ISO, maybe the SLS standards, there are SLS standards for the product, but now for each product you can find these standards. Quality management systems, let's say total quality management or the 5S systems, those are adopted as a whole. It's like a generic thing. We can adopt those things. For the SLS standards, it establishes the consensus procedures that are the basis for the development of Sri Lanka standards. That means SLS means Sri Lanka Standard Institute. They are developing these standards to apply within Sri Lanka. Most of these standards are established based on the international standards. Sometimes SLS standard itself refers to the British standard or the IEC standard. But let's say if we are doing a business in Sri Lanka, normally, let's say if you label in your label, if you mention the SLS standard number, that will give some confidence to the consumer that you are buying a product according to the Sri Lankan standards. There are some concerns about how the Sri Lankan standards behave, but I am not talking about that kind of thing. That's the basic concept is every time when you are buying, let's say if you want to buy a soap or something, if the soap is mentioned with the SLS number, that means that gives the confidence to the consumer. Ingredients used to prepare this particular soap having comply with the Sri Lankan standards, and it may not harmful to the health. That kind of impression and the confidence within the consumer. There are about 2,000 Sri Lankan standards that have been developed and approved by the Council of SLSI. National standards are voluntarily and serve interest well because all materially affected stakeholders have the opportunity to work together to create them. SLSI approved standards only become mandatory when and if they are adopted or referenced by the government regulation or when market forces make them imperative. That means adopting a standard is not a must condition, but majority of the organizations, they prefer to adopt the SLS standards. But let's say if the government regulation referred to have the Sri Lankan standards, then it's an essential condition. Also, now let's say every time now, since we are living in a competitive environment, some products may have the SLS standards. Not only the products, I am talking about the services as well. Maybe if some service-oriented company, if their service is according to the SLS standards, then maybe competitor, if they don't have that kind of reference, then automatically consumers may prefer to go with the service provider whom having the SLS standards. Okay. Normally, there are so many subjects covered by SLS. I think if you want to go through the whole list, there is a list published in the SLS website also. This is just agriculture, chemical, and I'm not going through this every item. Okay. And since I have to cover the big area, I am somewhat doing fast. If you want to hear, I don't know whether you have gone through the previous year question. Most of these questions will be somewhat generic question. I'm not asking the details about the SLA standards or the total quality management system, but you should have some conceptual framework on this quality management system. No point of going and reading the whole set in detail about one standard. After covering this session, you should able to write some general statements about the quality management systems or the health and safety procedures adopted in your organization. With your experience, you can write the your answers to the questions. Because of that, just keep in your mind this awareness. This is as a awareness to your question module. Okay. Then hazard analysis, critical control point. This was developed in the 1960s by the US NASA, mainly for their NASA applications. It is internationally established standard for protecting food supply from chemical and microbiological hazards. This HACCP, I think if you buy some this, let's say, I don't want to give any brand names. Let's say if you want to buy some soya meat or maybe this packet food, maybe noodles, everywhere this HACCP standard is there. That means they mention instead of SLS, HACCP standard. Once I explain it, you can understand why this kind of food processing industry, why they mention HACCP as their main standard. Okay. HACCP certification is an international standard defining the requirement for effective control of food safety. It is built around 7 principles. This mainly, what are these 7 principles? Conduct hazard analysis or biological, chemical, or physical food hazards. Determine the critical control points. That means, let's say if you want to produce some food processing factory, from the raw material itself, you have to identify the hazard of that particular ingredients. What kind of, let's say, you know what kind of ingredients you will use. Then initially, you have to identify the whole chain hazard analysis you have to carry it out. Then determine the critical control points, establish critical control limits, for example, minimum cooking temperature and time. Let's say now if you are working in a soya meat preparation factory, then you have to cook that means pre-cook these items. Then you should know what kind of temperature you have to maintain. That means there should be a maximum temperature and there should be a minimum temperature, and you have to maintain your temperature limits within these limits. Then initially you have to identify the whole hazards in the chain, the whole processing chain. Then you have to determine the critical control points. That's why it's mentioned hazard analysis critical control points. That means every critical control point, you are identifying the hazards and how that means your main objective is to limit the hazards in every critical control point. this was, I think I previously mentioned, this was developed by the NASA because they introduced these systems during the in 1960s. The astronauts, they went to moon. During that traveling, they have to use so many different food options. That's the first time these human people, that means people went to the moon. During that period, NASA had tried different food options. That means different packets, food packaging options, everything developed for that particular moon export. And established during that they introduced these HACCP standards. After they produced these products, they thought this could be used as a food processing standard. Then establish a system to monitor control of critical control points. Here the initial thing is to establish the critical control limits. Then after identify the critical control limits, you have to establish the critical control points. Okay. Then if there is any deviations, then you should have a method to establish a corrective actions. Establish procedure for verification to confirm that the HACCP system is working effectively. Whatever is quality management system, there should be a final thing is the feedback loop. That means this feedback loop will verify your process, will confirm the HACCP system. Based on these principles, you have to introduce the HACCP system in your process. That's the thing. Normally, mainly here in food processing industries, they use the HACCP. Okay, they can have the SLS standards, but SLS standards just give the how to prepare this product. That does not give this kind of control points. Normally, they can use SLS and HACCP together to have a proper quality product to the consumer. Most of the processed foods industry, they use both Sri Lankan standard and the HACCP. There could be other standards as well, because the ultimate objective is, normally we also think once we see the reverse side of the packet, so many labels are there, this is comply with this standard, this standards, that will give the ultimate confidence on the consumer that this product will give a better quality, and that will it will satisfy the consumer. Okay. And other one is the good manufacturing practices. This is similar to the food processing, but mainly this is used in the pharmaceutical industry as well as the food processing industry. Good manufacturing practices is a system for ensuring that products are consistently produced and controlled according to the quality standards. And normally, when you take a Sri Lankan standard or the IEC standard or BS standard, that will give a product quality standards to how to produce that particular product to comply with the regulation. But during the process, how to control or how to keep the good practices, normally this HACCP and GMP standards, those things will cover. Normally, let's say in this GMP, there are 5 Ps. Normally, you are talking about the 5 Ps. That means you have to have a proper management system on these 5Ps. What is these 5P? First one is the people. That means people who involved in this process. That people means not only the production line people, as well as the marketing people as well. Okay. Then the premises. That means that working environment. Then the processes, products, and procedures. That means this GMP standards, if you want to apply for a GMP standards, there are institutes, there are institute which provides the GMP certification. Actually, this is a certification that complies according to the GMP good manufacturing practices. Then they will have an internal audit in these aspects. First one is the people. Then they will look into how the people's behavior, how the peoples have given the instructions, all the things they are evaluate the these aspects: people, premises, processes, products, and procedures. GMP ensures that companies execute consistent procedures within safe environments. Hence, it prevents contamination, recalls, and loss of profit. I think that's the most important aspect. Let's say if you have a failure in your quality management process, there will be some contamination. Let's say if some food packet, if it contaminate with some thing, then you may have to recall not only the food. Maybe sometimes you can see these vehicles also, they are recalling for the repairs. Then it will be a huge additional cost to the companies. Let's say if the vehicle is produced in Japan, and if they have to recall that particular vehicle for the repairs, then they have to give training for the local agent. Then they have to send all the replacement items. Then sometimes for these replacement may need special tools and appliances. Then every country, they have to send these replacement tools and appliances. Then ultimately, it will impact to their profits as well as their image of the particular company. There are recalls in vehicles, but there are recalls in other industries as well. Main objective is to prevent this kind of contamination, recalls, and ultimately it leads to a loss of profit. GMP comes with strict protocols that lessen the risk of manufacturing errors. In the same way, companies can sustain efficient systems and processes to produce safe goods. Don't think this thing will apply only to the GMP. Every quality management system, same will apply. But now you can think why these different practices evolve. That means now previously we talk only ISO, then SLS for the Sri Lankan standards, now HSCPP, GM. Why these things are evolved? Because most of the organizations, their main objective is to have a profit. That's the main objective of the organization. Then they want to minimize or prevent the recalls. That's the main concern every organization wants to achieve during the process as well as after sales services. Normally, every company having they are giving a warranty period. Why they can give a warranty period? Normally, we also think, okay, if the company is giving 2-year warranty instead of 1 year, then it's better. And some companies give their products lifetime warranty. Then we think in our mind itself, it's a if some company is giving a lifetime warranty, that means in our mind, maybe their process of production is better than the competitor. Okay, that impression is there. And to give that kind of lifetime warranty, you should have a better practices during the manufacturing process. Okay, that's the main objective of having this quality management system. Then other thing is the total quality management. Normally we call is TQM. In TQM approach, that will start from the customer end. Most of the other approaches, it does not start from the customer side. That will get the customer feedback and do the corrective actions based on the customer feedback. But TQM approach, that will start from the customer's end. That means find out what the customer wants. But normally when you buy a product, you think they may not ask from you how to produce, what is your objective or what is your requirement. But since these are products having long lifetimes, and maybe some products they are manufacturing for more than 100 years, then they are having this feedback previously. When you are adopting the TQM system, normally it starts from the customer requirements, then design a product or service that meets or exceeds customer requirements. That's the main objective of the product. It should at least meet the customer satisfaction or exceed the customer satisfaction. Definitely, if that product exceeds the customer wants, then definitely customer will come and buy the product in next time as well. Then design the processes that facilitate doing the job right at the first time itself. That's the most important thing in the quality management system. That means main objective is to minimize, not to minimize, that means zero errors. That's the main objective. Keep track of results, extend these concepts to suppliers as well. Why we have to extend this concept to suppliers? Let's say if we are doing a production of some equipment, definitely you have to buy the raw materials or the some equipment from the suppliers. Then if the suppliers also adopt this quality management system, normally their materials, they are maybe it could be a spare parts or maybe some raw materials. Those parts also comply with the quality standards. Then automatically your end product will have a better quality that will satisfy the customer, or maybe that will exceed the customer satisfaction. Then what are the elements in the total quality management elements? Its continual improvement is there. That means during the process from here, just I have to explain, there is normally in the total quality management, it's a cycle. First one is plan, then do, that means you are carrying out the work, then study, then act. Normally this is called as a PDCA cycle. Planning, then doing that thing, study, then act. In that process, you have to focus on these elements. That means continual improvement should be there. Let's say when you send your product to the market, once you get the feedback from the customers, you should immediately change your processes to rectify those errors, or maybe some complaints should be there, or otherwise you have to stop immediately the processing of the next batch, and you have to attend those complaints, and maybe you can recheck the new product, whether it's satisfying the requirements of the customer. Maybe you can do some pilot marketing work, then you can send to the end market for that particular product. And second one is the focus on the customer. That's most important. Ultimately, normally in every private sector, normally they say customer is the king, but I think that word is still there, customer is the king. But when you go for some services in the banks or maybe the government institutes, you may think whether you are a customer or you are a king or a slave. That's the thing in your mind. But let's say if that private sector organization or government sector organization, if they provide the services with your utmost satisfaction, definitely you will appreciate that particular, let's say, bank or the government institute, and definitely you will have a positive feedback on that particular service. Then other thing is the employee empowerment. That means you have to motivate. Normally in every manufacturing organization or the service organization, normally employees, after working for several years, employees may think, I am doing some boring, repetitive work. That kind of attitude, those are normal in the human resource management. Then you should have empowerment to the employees. That means maybe job rotation, that job enrichment, or whatever way. It's like a different aspects, not in the total quality management, but that total quality management elements should address the employee empowerment aspects as well. Then other thing is the process center. Mainly these quality management systems should be centered along the process. So here this TQM is not a separate standard. This can be integrated with the GMP. This could be integrated with the HACCP. And let's say in the HACCP, you have to define the critical points. These critical points are along your process. That means every time you have to focus on the process. Then the integrated system means that's the same thing I told. When you are adopting the total quality management system, this maybe in here this TQM method does not have any reference to the Sri Lankan standard or the IEC standard or the BS standard or ISO standard. Whatever the standard product standards, if you are adopting the total quality management, it will automatically comply with these particular relevant product specific standards. Then decision making based on facts. Every time your decision making process, you have to collect more and more feedback, more and more information, and based on the facts, you should do the improvement to your products. Then strategic and systematic approach. And in the total quality management, that's the most important thing. You have to take the strategic decisions as well as systematic, in a systematic approach. That means you should not take maybe some decisions we are taking, okay, to change the whole system. But that does not mean, may not give a proper output as you wish. that I am not talking about the government system change. Here I am talking mainly on the production process system change. Is similar to government decision making. Let's say now just example, this organic fertilizer decision. It's not a strategic decision or systemic, and it's not adopted in systematic approach. Then whole country now today facing a food scarcity because of that decision. Same thing, it will happen to your organization if you adopt some decision without. That's why in TQM, if you adopt the TQM process in the government decision making process, you should not take that kind of decision. Okay, let's say just the example I am talking about, this organic fertilizer decision. If you adopt that decision, maybe in good faith, but first thing you have to think whether that decision is based on facts. Okay, maybe that facts should be whether applicable on the ground. Okay, and whether that decision is a strategic decision, and whether that adoption method is in systematic. Okay, that's the thing. Normally, let's say if the government take that decision, okay, first year we are going for a 25% organic fertilizer and 75% chemical fertilizer. Next year, maybe 40 to 60. It's like around maybe 5 years time, we can go for 100% organic fertilizer system. That then you can say you have adopted in a good decision based on fact, strategically and systematic approach in your organization, or maybe in your factory also. Sometimes you may change your processes suddenly, but that may not give the desired output as you wish. Then you have to change all these processes. Then that will give a reduced output. Maybe the people may think you are doing wrong things. Then your credibility and the image of the company will fail. Same thing happen to the government. Just think about, compare with the present government activities. But don't think I am trying to criticize that one here, just to give a approach, whether if you adopt the proper quality management approach, then every decisions are based on facts. And other thing is, so communication medium should be there to communicate and keep aware the all stakeholders. I think that's also completely missing in this government. When government try to adopt this organic fertilizer into the system, that's a must. Let's say if you want to change your present system or present process in your organization, you should communicate all the stakeholders before adopting that kind of change. That's a must. Okay, let's say if your company certified with the quality management system, then automatically you have to comply with the procedures. Sometimes you may think these procedures will hindrance your work process. Maybe it's an additional task, but you are following the standard protocols, and definitely during these standard protocols, you may come across that means restrictions or the bottlenecks that could face during processes. That's why every quality management system having a loop, feedback loop, maybe through the consumers, maybe through the employees within the organization. That means that's why every time you have to consider every employee in your organization as a part of the quality management process. That's a very important thing. Okay. Then we'll go to 5S concept. This is, I think, it's a general thing. Most of you may have known these terms. This was initiated in the Japan, and there are 5 Japanese words starting from S, but in English terms also it's mentioned as start from S. First one is sort. That means you have to sort the things. Second one is set in order. That means after sorting, let's say in your table, just I will give an example. In your office table, you can keep the documents on your table in an orderly manner or whatever you wish. But if you keep it in an orderly manner, then it's very easy to find the document. Let's say to keep the orderly manner, definitely you have to sort the documents. That's the first thing you have to do, whether it may be a documents, maybe a tools in a factory. You have to sort. That's sorting order, so sorting manner. That does not identify in the 5S concept, but that's a company own method. But first thing is, this is also a generic statement, the generic management system. After sorting, you have to set it in an order. I think most of the organizations, these tools and appliances, to place the tools and appliances on a specific locations, the majority of the organizations, they adopt these 5S systems. Also to keep the documentations also, they will adopt the 5S systems. As soon as you see the tools locations, you may be able to identify, or maybe this number 14 spanner is missing from the tool set, or maybe the 14th file is missing from the document list. Then that kind of sorting, then setting order. Third one is the shine. Shine means to clean. That's a must. Normally, you are adopting all these standards, but not clean it properly. Let's say if you use some tool, once you use the tool, you have to clean it and place it again in the same location. Not only the tool, as soon as you enter into a factory or the organization which adopts the 5S systems, you can feel there is a better cleanliness in the organization or the factory. It's very clearly visible, the cleanliness. That's a must. Okay, then you should have a standardized. Standardized means all these equipment, whatever the things, you have to have a proper method of standardization. Let's say there could be, let's say if it's a filing system, maybe outgoing files in a one place, incoming files maybe in a different place. Also some circulars may be in a different one location. Likewise, you can have a standard system for the filing. As again, maybe in a tools or whatever the things, you can have a standardized system. And other thing is, you have to maintain the first 3 S's. That's also a must. Now, let's say sorting, set in order, shine. That means cleanliness. Are we doing in every week or every 2 weeks time or every month? That kind of standard time frame, you have to ensure that your organization employees will comply. That's also must. Otherwise, once you normally, in my experience also in our organizations also, when we are having a 5S day, then at that particular day, we are cleaning all the things, we are placing all the files into some orderly manner, then we are sorting, set, clean, but maybe again, maybe another year's time, we are trying to repeat that process, but that does not give impression to the customer who comes into the organization. We are adopting 5S. Okay, that means if we are adopting the 5S, maybe at least twice a month, or maybe it depends on the organization, you should adopt the practices to maintain the first 3 S's. That's the standardization. Then the sustain. Sustain means after adopting 1, 2, 3, 4, how to keep that thing throughout the period, not the period, maybe the throughout the lifetime of the organization. That's a must. Now for that, there will be external evaluators, maybe external auditors. That's why all these quality management systems, once they give the confirmation or the accreditation, they are having a visit by the quality auditors, and they will do a evaluation for a particular period of time. Now, let's say if these auditors, normally in our practices, when we know that quality auditors are visiting to look into the particular location, then we are doing all the first 3 S's. But that should not be the practice. Number 4 is the element which should give the feedback loop to 1, 2, 3. Maybe that time frame you have to adopt within your organization. That's the 5S concept. This concept was developed in Japan, and most of the Japanese organizations, they were successfully implement this 5S concept. But here, nothing will regard in the product specific standard. This is a very generic quality management system. But SLS standards, those are called the standards. SLS standards, ISO also standard, BS standard, then maybe the IEC. Those are standards. Product specific standards are there. Then the quality management systems are there. Okay, I think with that, I will conclude the quality management systems. Within next, try to give some awareness on the occupational health, safety, and monitoring. Hope you understand what I give the description on the quality management system. Don't look into a very detailed quality management things. Keep it aware on the concepts. Okay, that's the main thing we want to consider in this session. If you want to learn the in detail, maybe you have to follow a quality management session in different forum. Okay, Here we'll go for the other part, call it occupational health safety monitoring. Responsibilities of occupational health safety monitoring. First one is to maintaining the central safety and accident statistics. That's the most important part in the this OHS monitoring system. Most of the organizations, they don't have such record. That means historical records. Let's say if I ask about your organization, what was your most recent accident in your organization? You may say, okay, I can remember this kind of accident. Then if I ask whether it's a fatal accident or just an injury, then if it's a very serious accident, you may remember that one. If I ask what kind of minor accident happened, maybe that kind of things you don't have the records. But if you adopt the proper OHS monitoring system, first thing is you have to maintain the accident statistic in a central location. That's the most important thing. Then carrying out safety audits. Like previously quality audits, here OHS officers, they are carrying out the safety audits. This is very much important to maintain and prevent the health hazards. Normally, every organizations, they are giving the PPEs, that means protective equipments. Maybe now, let's say if during the corona pandemic, everyone they wear the mask, maybe the PPE clothes, but now there is a trend that people are not wearing masks, not wearing the PPEs, that kind of thing is there. But let's not only that, let's say if we are working in a hazardous environment, maybe you have to wear the proper protective equipment, then these kind of audits, and whether not only the PPEs, maybe you have to ensure that your fire extinguishers are in proper way, whether these are expired or not. Those things will be evaluated during these safety audits, whether all these rotating machines and all the things having the safety clearances, whether people are maintaining these safety clearances, by having interviews with the people or whether having a discussion with the persons, you can carry out these safety audits. Once they do these safety audits, that's awareness to the people who work in that particular organization. Then maintaining specification of all personal protective equipment. Normally in every organizations, they are having their own PPEs. When they want to procure these PPEs, normally they have to buy the PPEs in a quality PPEs which satisfy your requirements. Then you have to have a proper specifications and technical requirements. OHS branch is normally preparing those things. Monitoring the adequacy and quality of safety equipment. That's the thing I told previously. That means quality means whether these helmets are in a good condition, safety belts are in good condition, whether these fire extinguishers are in operating conditions, and whether it's expired or not. Those things they have to monitor. Then ensuring the adequate safety related training is given to all required staff. That's also a must. Let's say you have to give a fire drills, how to extinguish a fire, those kind of training you have to provide. Then how to do an emergency exit during some disaster. Those things you have to give training to all the staff. You should not wait until the hazard is faced. That means you should prepare the people how to face the disaster. Okay, that's the main thing. Ensuring periodical testing of all equipment that requires mandatory safety inspections, ensuring prevention of injuries due to the substandard material use, issuing a periodical safety bulletin indicating any major accident, near misses with analysis. That is very much important. Every month, your objective is to minimize the major accidents. Then you should keep aware what kind of major accidents or the near misses happen during the previous situations. Maybe if you are having a bulletin in every 6 months, within that period, you can include all your statistic in that bulletin and keep aware the people who are working in the institute or the factory. This kind of accident happened during the last 6 months. These are the near misses, and then automatically they have awareness, and they will have proper safety measures to mitigate that kind of accident. Then issuing and updating safety related circulars, ensuring that staff is not exposed to conditions that could lead to non-occupational health issues, coordinating on safety aspects with Ministry of Labor and Labor Relations who issues the licenses. Actually, most of the organizations, they appoint health, say maybe it's different names, occupational health and safety officer, or maybe a health and safety officer. That health and safety officer, he has to carry out these monitoring functions. Then what kind of accidents in factories, sites and workplaces? In many of the workplaces in Sri Lanka, proper occupational safety and health management systems and proper risk assessment systems are not followed. Sometimes you may think in our organization, we are following all these things, then it's a very good organization, but I am talking about mainly the factories, and you can see I think majority of you may be a civil engineering as a part, and in your site, civil engineering sites, you can see whether your workplaces are properly adopting these occupational safety and health management systems. Normally, since it's when you are starting a site, normally it's you have to comply with, you should have a first aid room, you should have a safety name boards, those things are there, but occupational and safety officers' job is to look into those things, whether those are available and whether it's properly functioned. Mainly these fire extinguishers, maybe the first aid rooms, whether these first aid rooms are having the sufficient medicines, those things you have to check. The management of every workplace always target on profit and productivity. Since this is an additional cost item, majority of the workplace management, they are not willing to provide this kind of facilities to the workers due to the poor knowledge, education on the subject, or due to the lack of awareness. They are not aware on proper occupational safety and health management systems and proper risk assessment system. I think ISL's main objective of having this subject in your B paper also to give a awareness on these aspects. Maybe once you learn these aspects, not only for the your B paper, maybe you should adopt these practices in your workplace as well. Therefore, unexpected accidents and diseases occur in workplaces and the profit and productivity go down. Management think by adopting these things, they have to incur more losses. That means their profit will reduce. But let's say if something happened to the employee, a worker, or maybe a fire hazard or something happened, that loss or that accident may cause a huge loss, and they are not only the profit, their image and their productivity, all the things will go down. Okay. But initially, they may think we can reduce some additional cost. The occurrence of occupational industrial accidents and occupational diseases are on the increase in our Sri Lankan system. You can see a lot now in most of the garment factories. You can see this food poisoning is there. Some chemical industries, chemical infections are there. That kind of thing is there. In Sri Lanka, about 4,000 accidents are being reported yearly, and the number of working days lost due to accident is estimated around 600,000 work days every year, according to the International Labour Organization. Okay, maybe these figures may be changed in year-to-year basis. Main objective is to reduce the number of accidents. Here, what is the impact on these accidents? It's a time loss, reputation, psychology of workers, medical expenses will occur due to the effect of accident. Those are the impacts on accident. Normally, what kind of accident we can come across in your factories, sites, workplaces? Okay, these are just to give you, make aware. That means you have to be careful when people are exposed to this kind of hazardous environment. Then you should have a proper safety measures to prevent this kind of accident. One is from falling from ladders. Then I'm not going individual items. Then falling from ladders means then how to overcome that kind of accident. Then normally in our theory, we can say he should place the ladder in proper way, proper angle. He should have a safety belt after climb and doing the work. All the things will be there. But the problem is people are not following these things in the workplaces. Then falling from scaffoldings, falling objective from upper floors, soil collapse while excavation, slipping and stripping at the site, working with hazardous materials, dust, liquid, gases, and flames. Electrocution also could happen. Fire and explosions, elevator accidents, building collapses, and then accident while using vehicles and machines. These are the typical accidents which could happen at sites. Then what are the causes for the accident? Mainly the unsafe working conditions. And the main thing is the poor training. That's the thing. This occupational and health, this OHS officer's duty that I told, he should have a proper training to the normally these organizations, they may think once they recruit the new employee, he can start and do the work from the first day itself. But organization must have a responsibility to give a proper training to every employee, not only the unskilled person, skilled person also. You have to give a training, then automatically his techniques, everything will improve. Inadequate safety procedures and precautions, that's also a main concern. Negligence or carelessness. Normally, if some person having a negligence or carelessness, you may not able to prevent that accident, but you should have a proper procedures or maybe a checklist to ensure that this kind of negligence or carelessness may not cause a damage or harm to the organization or the equipment. But whatever this checklist or any, there could be this kind of accident in your organization. But normally, once the accident happens, definitely that will cause a huge impact on the supervisors. Maybe the supervisor will be an engineer like you. Then you have to give a statements. Let's say if it's a fatal accident, so many inquiries you have to face. Then they will ask what is your safety procedures. Then they will ask whether these safety procedures are adopted. Whether do you have checked about the equipment quality, all the things they will inquire during the inquiries. Our main objective is to prevent such kind of accident. Then failure to follow the safety rules, that's also a major concern. Normally, once the people do the same work for a long time, they think they are expert on that particular work, but if a small mistake may cause a huge impact to cause a major accident or the major damage to a equipment. Okay. Then what kind of things can happen? Maybe a fracture, maybe a broken ribs, burns, amputations. Ultimate thing is the death that could happen. Our main objective is to prevent such kind of accident in the factory site or the workplace. Then other most important thing is to hazard identification and risk assessment. Now, if you normally you have to think that every organization may have a accident during the process of your work or the construction or whatever the thing. And during that process, you have to identify the hazard, what kind of hazard, and what kind of risk assessment. Let's say now falling off a ladder, maybe if that particular place ladder is, let's say 10 feet, then you can identify what kind of hazard could happen. That means falling from a ladder can happen. Then you should have a risk, whether by falling 10 feet, you may not come across a fatal accident, but it could cause some injury to your bones or something. That kind of assessment you have to do in every location. Why we need to avoid emergency situation? Here mainly by identifying the hazard and risk assessment, what kind of thing you are trying to avoid. That means as soon as you have, let's say if in a work site or any factory, if as soon as you hear if some person is fallen from a ladder, then there will be a emergency situation within that organization. That means every employee may run into that particular place, and there are so many rumors, those kind of things will spread. Then why we should identify the hazards? First one is to avoid the emergency situation, because it is unwanted, because we don't want any emergency situations create during the workplace. That's our objective. Then that means unwanted, usually unexpected. If you are expecting a hazard, then that a different thing. Normally, we think our premises are hazard-free premises. Then handling the emergency situation is a complex thing. It's not a normal thing. Have unpredictable causes. Maybe as soon as, let's say, if a person is fallen from the high-rise, higher location, then other workers may have a protest. That kind of thing may be there. Then have unpredictable causes. Need to act immediately. As soon as you have for that kind of situation, you have to act immediately. Then responses is costly. Your resources are limited. Immediate aftermath is usually a chaos. That means it's not a normal situation. You have to you have to attend this emergency situation in a chaotic condition. Those are the things you should know, and you have to have a proper hazard identification and risk assessment. Then what kind of methods we can use for the identify the hazards? First one is work through survey. Normally, these OHS officers, they are going through the whole area by looking at every location. They can identify the hazards. Then you can use the standard checklist, interview with the employees, and observation. That means that's why I told every quality management system or the occupational health and safety monitoring systems, you should not ignore the employees. They are the most important stakeholder in the process. That means you have to, while you are discussing with the employee, you can identify the hazards, and by having a discussion, maybe with the observation and other. Then decide who might be harmed and how. Then first one is to identify the hazard, then decide who might be harmed and how. Evaluate the risk and take actions to prevent them. Record your findings, review the risk assessment. That's the procedure we can adopt to identify the hazards. Then next thing is the fire risk and control. Okay, wait. Fire risk and controls. Similar to the accidents, there could be fire risk. Then how do we control the fire? Fire risk assessments are a snapshot of how protected any given property is to ensure the safety of its occupants in the event of a fire. The fire risk assessments also identify corrective actions and further steps to achieve an appropriate level of fire safety. Most common fire hazard you will find of is sometimes a human error, maybe faulty wires, overloaded electrical sockets, cluttered office spaces, maybe heaters. It's in the offices, but in the factories, there could be electrical hazards, maybe some hot work, flammable liquid, gases, combustible dust, equipment and machinery. Whatever the things, during the fire risk assessment, whether it's in the office or the factory, you have to identify what are the places and what are the causes that will initiate the fire. Then how do we control the things? There are quite few dangers specific to warehouses when it comes to fire risk. Each danger also has its own level of frequency. That means here I just gone through the warehouses as well. In warehouses, there could be intentionally set fires also, because there are people, some frauds are there, some things will be there. Let's say if some inquiries going on a missing items, then easiest thing is these people may do intentional fires to the warehouses. That also there. Then mainly these fire risks are mainly due to the electrical issues. Then sometimes in the heating equipment, some exposures or the smoking materials. Then what is the role of the fire service? Ensure life safety in any kind of disaster, prevent or mitigate damages due to fire and other related causes, protect the environment from adverse effects of fire, chemical and other related disasters. That's the most important thing. There are factories, warehouses, which they store the hazardous chemicals. Let's say something happened to that warehouse, then these chemicals may get fire, then that will have a major impact on the environment. Then you should have a proper mechanisms to extinguish the fire. That means you have to pre-plan for that kind of extinguishing methods. Dealing with humanitarian issues where necessary, improve the fire safety awareness among staff. That's also an important thing. And this is just for your information. Let's say if you want to have an apartment or maybe some warehouse or maybe some building in a house, not a house I am talking about, any other, maybe a high-rising building or maybe a commercial building, definitely you have to get a approval from the Colombo Municipal Council Fire Service Department for the fire protection. There are mandatory fire protection requirements. They have identified manual call points, automatic fire detection, voice evacuation, fireman communication system according to the purpose group, height, size of the buildings. I am not doing, because when you if you want, you can go to their website and this sheet is available for everything. Let's say residential things, office, commercial, they have identified based on the purpose group, height and size of the building, what are the compulsory mandatory items. Let's say manual call points are mandatory for the everywhere. Fire detection scheme, maybe in office, commercial buildings, that may be a must. And for a residential apartments, sometimes maybe in a pantry area where the gas tanks are there, they may request to install a fire detection system. These kind of requirements they have mentioned in the their document. Then that's a must. Normally the concern is most of these buildings, now they know that they have to get the approval from the fire protection requirements from the municipal council during the process of obtaining the initial approval for the building plan itself. Otherwise, you may miss all these particular points, and if they request to install those points in later stage, most of the time you have to damage your finished walls and finish aesthetic areas to install these fire protection requirements. Because of that, you have to get the confirmation during the building planning approval process itself. Whatever the change during the or deviation to your original plan, you have to inform them and get the new requirements. Otherwise, implementing such requirements in a later stage may a very high cost, as well as that will cost to the aesthetic of the building. Then the environmental pollution control and waste management. Here, so many topics are given by the ISL to give a short description on each topic. Since this is a vast topic, I am covering it within 2 hours. Just go through these slides. That's the main thing I am requesting to you. Environmental pollution and control, air pollution, that in environment you can have different aspects. First one is the air pollution poses a serious problem in urban areas with rapid urbanization and industrialization. The most promising reason for air pollution can be considered as the huge amount of gas and particulate matter emissions from the industries, thermal power plants, and automobiles. There are 5 main air pollutants based on the atmospheric concentration are carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, and PM. CO2, SOx, PM exceeds WHO standards in major cities. Those are the main things. I think this carbon monoxide mainly in vehicle emissions, and nitrogen oxide, this NOx also in vehicle emissions. SOx, whenever you use the fossil fuels in the industries as well as the power plants, thermal power plants, those emit these pollutant to the air. Let's say if you are working in a cement factory or maybe that tile factory, there are particulate emissions also that will also cause maybe breathing problems to the people. Then you have to have a proper mitigation methods before emitting the, that means before these things to atmosphere. Now, since I am in electricity board, I can explain. Normally, we adopt so many mitigation measures to prevent particulate emissions, and we can use better fuel options for to prevent the NOx, sulfur dioxide. Another thing is we can have a very high rise stacks to emit these things. Now, most dangerous concern is the vehicle emissions, because all these emissions at your normally at your nose level. That means, but normally stack emissions are at a very high level. But whatever the level you are emitting to the air, that will pollute the air. Then other main thing is the groundwater pollution due to the release of chemicals, paintings, tannins without retreatments. That's a costly concern. Most of the factories, they release the polluted water to the ground through the streams or maybe canals or whatever the way. That will lead to a huge damage to the river water. Maybe that will impact onto the drinking water. I think you may have heard recently, not very much recently, maybe around 6 months to 1 year back, we had some issue in a Biagama area. There were effluents flowing to the Kalani River. Then that will cause the impact for the drinking water in the Colombo as well. That means as soon as these chemicals flows to the river, most of the people, they are using river for their basic needs, then that will cause huge environmental damage to the people and the animals as well. Then frequent algae blooms in inland tanks and reservoirs due to discharges of waste. You can see, I think previously in Bear Lake in Colombo, it was completely green. That is mainly because so many discharges of waste into the Bear Lake. Still it's there, but you should have a continuous process of cleaning, or otherwise you have to give a proper awareness to the people who are discharging these waste to the canals or the rivers. Improper waste management, that's a main concern. Then noise and sound pollution. This is a typical graph. I can show it. This is the real-time data. You can see several cities air quality. Okay, and the city central, it's having green color, yellow color. It's moderate. All the other areas, this is for a particular day. Okay, in Gampaha, Ambalantota, Colombo, Dambulla, Tigana, Nigambu, Nuwara, those areas in green, that means the air quality is good. But you can see the Indian territory, most of the cities in moderate level. That means you can see the air quality of the country. Now, why can be having this kind of air quality issue? Any guess on that? Why can be having this kind of? Mainly due to the traffic congestion in the Kandy. Okay, this is mainly a vehicle emissions, and in that particular day, maybe Colombo maybe recorded a good value, but if you, this is, you can see on the web IQAR map. If you go to that web, I think those information are collected from the Sri Lanka Meteorological Department, and they are having an online air quality monitoring system. And PM particulate also you can see, this is in Colombo. You can see PM10, Colombo and Kandy. PM10 particulate emissions are higher in Kandy than Colombo. Okay. Then PM 2.5, this is particulate emission size. Okay. Okay. Colombo and Kandy, it's a comparison. Normally, when you compare the Sri Lankan cities, Colombo and Kandy are the worst environmental polluted cities in Sri Lanka. Okay, and our main objective is to prevent such emissions. Now, PM10 and PM 2.5 is not good for the asthma people. There will be breathing issues. Now, I think you may have heard about the Indian Delhi capital. Some days they are unable to do any transport or any work in Delhi capital, mainly due to these particulate emissions, because they are having so many industries and so many thermal power plants, and they are using low quality coal to generate the power, and they don't have proper mitigation aspects. Because of that, and they are having a huge particulate emissions in cities. Then we'll see what kind of things we can look into the waste management. Inadequate knowledge on industrial solid waste recovery, processing, and disposal. That's the main concern regarding the waste management. Inadequate knowledge, then lack of coordination among internal bodies. a lack of coordination among internal bodies, profit-oriented private sector, that's profit-oriented private sector, loopholes in legal provision. That means people may think you can dispose garbage in any location. Then unawareness of new industrial waste management strategies like water treatment, effluent treatment, like that. They are not aware. And also insufficient government investment. Government has not provided sufficient locations to garbage dumping and other things. Poor monitoring. There is no monitoring system whether these organizations are managing waste in proper way. Unsatisfactory service of facilitators, insufficient technology, negative attitudes. But main thing is profit-oriented organizations, they are not willing to invest on these waste management strategies. But there are positive things if you adopt a proper waste management principle. Sometimes, let's say if you adopt the water treatment plants, you can utilize that wastewater in a different thing, not for the drinking purposes. All the other, maybe I know that there are so many organizations, they use the wastewater treated, that means treated wastewater for their toilets and other washing purposes, not for the drinking purposes, all the other purposes. That means ultimately they are circulate within the organization for the better use of the waste materials for their betterment of their organization. Can you switch off your mic? Environmental pollution control and waste management. The Environmental Pollution Control Unit of Environment Pollution Control Division is mainly responsible for prevention and control environmental pollution issues. The main instrument through which the Pollution Control Unit performs its function is the Environmental Protection Licensee. I think you may know, whatever the industry, they have to get the Environmental Protection License. Normally we call EPL. Normally they are giving for a year by year basis. They have to extend that validity of the license. Once they request for the extension, in generally, the officers from the Environmental Pollution Control Division, they have to visit that particular location and they have to ensure that their initial conditions are satisfied at present. And once they satisfied only, they have to extend the license. During that process, they have to look into all the initial conditions, whether still the initial conditions are still in place to prevent or mitigate the environmental impacts, to take adequate mitigatory measures in advance to abate or minimize the anticipated environment pollution arising from a proposed industrial activity at the initial stage. Avoid difficulties to comply with the standards stipulated by the CEA, which discharge, deposit their effluents waste to the environment or emit noise or gases to the environment. As industrialists have located their industries in a hazard manner without incorporating the mitigation measures at the beginning. Normally, let's say if you want to build a new industry, you have to apply for the environmental that means you have to carry out the environmental assessment and you have to obtain the environmental clearance. Then during that providing the environmental clearance process, they are looking at all these aspects. That means they whether it's give the to mitigate the air pollution, water pollution, noise, waste management, all the things. They are looking and providing you the guidelines. It's like a conditional environmental approval will be given and you have to comply with these conditions. That means main objective is to prevent and protect the environment from the air pollution, ground pollution, sound pollution, or the water pollution as well. Okay, we do other slide as air pollution mitigation monitoring, environmental quality monitoring, ambient air quality they are measuring, emission monitoring, monitoring static emissions, monitoring other leaks. If fugitive emissions means leaks and irregular emissions, noise and vibration. Then water pollution monitoring, control of water pollution through monitoring of water and industrial wastewaters, compliance monitoring of industrial wastewater for regulatory purposes, control of discharge of industrial effluents. That means their main objective is to mitigate the air pollution and the water pollution. Those are the main thing. Air pollution includes the noise and vibration as well. Then the personal protective equipment. I won't go through each item here. Why we need the PPEs provide adequate protection against the particular hazards for which they are designed. Be of safe design. It's just like why we want to wear these personal protective equipment, and that will ensure the employee is in a safety condition during performing his work. That's the most important thing by wearing the personal protective impact. Just see if you not wearing a helmet, if there is any impact on head, then there will be a fatal damage may cause. Then every employer must wear a helmet. Maybe sometimes you have to wear a face mask if you are working in a chemical environment, dust environment, those things you have to wear proper PPEs. Then what kind of personal protective equipment? Newly one is the protective clothes for COVID-19. Then it could be a hand protection, body protection, breath protection. Whatever the body equipment, it depends on the work you are performing, depends on the work you are performing. If let's say if you are doing a welding works, you have to protect your eyes. Likewise, depend on your working environment, you have to provide the correct PPEs to the employees. This is, I just want to do it managing the pandemic situation. This pandemic situation means not the COVID pandemic I'm talking about, disaster management. Disaster is like a hazard, is any phenomenon that has the potential to cause disruption or damage to humans and their environment. A vulnerability is the degree to which a population, individual, organization is unable to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from the impacts of the direct and indirect disaster. Capacity is the ability of a population, individual, or organization to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from the impact of disaster. Resilience is the ability to withstand and recover quickly from a disaster management, disaster emergency. Here, disaster risk is hazard. let's say if we have a hazard, here just see that lower side capacity. If we have a good capacity to withstand this hazard, then disaster risk will be lower. That's the main thing we should develop. A capacity is the ability of the population, individual or organization to anticipate, cope up with, resist and recover from the impacts of disaster. That means here how to minimize the disaster risk. That means normally by identifying the hazards, that means let's say in your process there will be hazards that you may not able to prevent, not stop. There will be hazards, but proper identification of the hazard, and if you can take the proper mitigation action to prevent any hazard through the proper hazard assessment. This is not a, I am not telling this is not a numerical formula. This is just a conceptual formula. Normally you can, if you have a proper identification of the hazards and risk assessment, you can control the hazard. By controlling the hazard, and if you, another thing is by having proper training, proper capacity building, you can increase the capacity. Then automatically you can reduce your disaster risk. That means in pandemic means the disaster, that disaster, how to manage the disaster means you have to identify the disaster risk and you have to minimize the disaster risk. How do we minimize the disaster risk? By identifying the hazards, by taking a proper mitigation actions, and also by adopting proper capacity building techniques. You can reduce the disaster risk. In a disaster management process, okay, after having the disaster, in the disaster management, there are two things. One is the risk reduction. That means initially you can plan. That means after identifying the hazards, then you should have a proper risk assessment and you should take the risk reduction methods. That means one is the prevention. Maybe if you can do the 100% prevention, then that's a must. Then let's say if you know some place a person can fall from fall, then if you have a safety net or something, then you can prevent that hazard. Then other one is the mitigation. That means you may not able to 100% completely prevent, but you are trying to mitigate. That means you are trying to have proper safety codes, warnings, symbols, everything that, and ensure that some person is not going for that particular hazardous area. Yeah, that means not the normal person, but okay, person who work in that area, he has to go and do the work, then he should have a proper safety methods. Then you are trying to mitigate the hazard. Then other thing is the preparedness. That preparedness for the risk reduction, that means keep aware the persons, as well as you can have a preparedness for the response as well. That means in pre-planned manner, you know if something happen, what kind of actions we have to do. Then during the disaster, you don't have any other options. You have to do a relief operations. Then first thing, you have to have a relief operations. Maybe it could be a recovery operations. Then sometimes you have to rehabilitate. Let's say if something happen, it's fire hazard, then you have to rehabilitate, or sometimes you have to reconstruct the whole things. In disaster management, main I think is risk reduction actions should be there and response action should be there. Now, if you properly identify the hazards and risk assessment, then you can have a risk reduction principles by prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. Or otherwise, you have to have a response actions, but definitely you should not ignore the response actions. You should be prepared for the response actions as well. Let's say you should have a ambulance number, maybe you should have a contact numbers of the most nearest hospital. Those things you should have in earliest possible manner. That's the main thing in the preparedness planning. First thing is the capacity, risk assessment, capacity building, capacity assessment, capacity and vulnerability both assessment could be there. That's the thing. Now, that's the thing. Your main thing is if you enhance your capacity, then you can reduce the disaster risk. And preparedness is a continuous process. You should not do at once. It's a continuous process. Attempts to reduce the unknowns in an emergency. If you have a proper preparedness, then you know how people will react. That's why these organizations, they are carrying out fire drills, maybe emergency escape trainings, those things they are doing as a actual situations. These training should be performed. Then employees will know what kind of actions they have to follow during the emergency disaster situation. Aims to evoke appropriate actions should be based on what is likely to happen, must be based on knowledge, requires continuous proportion to keep the momentum, should focus on principles, partly an educational and training process. This preparedness mainly an educational and training process. That's the most important thing in the disaster management. That means risk reduction, under risk reduction, prevention, mitigation, and preparedness, and the response. This response, if we have a proper awareness among the employees, then this response action is very easy. That's the most important thing. And here the laws, I'm not going through this anything. This is just for there are some laws in the Sri Lanka Factory Ordinance, Electricity Act, Employment of Empowerment Children Act. Those laws are there. This is, I think, last thing. Okay. Shall we do for another 5 to 10 minutes? Is it okay? Then social responsibility and concerns in managing projects. What are the social responsibilities? Your ultimate objective of the completion of the project to give a that means what desired outcome of the project. Then what kind of sorry, there's some message. Can we have the recording today itself? Couldn't join due to the power cut. I think ISL will facilitate that one. Okay, maybe you can contact ISL. I think this is record. They will publish the recording and they will share with you. Okay, I will just check that one. Social responsibility of and concerns in managing project. Okay, sorry. How do we managing a project? That's the main thing. Define a path. That's the must. A project needs to run straight forward. A clear path map out from start to finish ensures the outcome meets the goal of your project. Then establish a schedule, enforces to teamwork, maximizes resources, streamline the processes. Another main thing is the control of cost. No point of carrying out the project by overrunning the cost. That means if the project cost is overrun, then definitely you should have a responsibility to give a justification on the cost overrun items, but mainly project should complete on time and define cost. That's the must, but there will be uncontrollable things that will give the deviations, but that deviation should be justifiable. And other main thing is you should not compromise the quality. Now that's the main responsibility during the managing the project. And social concern is your key element is you have to satisfy the stakeholder needs. That means this stakeholder, let's say if you are carrying out a road development project, then you are having a project objective is there. That means to construction that particular road. Then deliverables and due date means what is the completion time, all the things, project schedule, roles and responsibilities within the team members. Then you have to maintain the project budget. Then you should communicate among the teams and you have to complete the project. But every time you have to satisfy the stakeholder needs. These stakeholders may be internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. These external stakeholders may be the general public, then environmental organizations, maybe NGOs, maybe religious institutes. So many stakeholders are there. While performing this particular project, you should have a proper establishment with and the communication with the stakeholders. If something happen, or maybe if you not comply or satisfy with, let's say, environmental concerns, then all these environmental stakeholders will object to that particular project and they will request to take mitigation actions during the project construction. Then that will cause to your project deliverables. That means due dates, you may not be able to complete the project. Then there will be additional costs. That means your social responsibility is when managing a project is to ensure that I can't say that means you can ensure 100% compliance with the every stakeholder requirements, but you have to address the concerns raised by the majority of the stakeholders in Sri Lanka. For every project, there will be some extreme people, they are objecting for everything, but let's say if the 80% of the complaints, if you can satisfy and complete the project, that's a good outcome when you are managing the project. Okay. Then here I have just mentioned what are the stakeholder benefits: senior manager benefit, functional manager benefit, team member benefits. Now here stakeholders, don't think only internal stakeholders. You are having external stakeholders as well. Then main concern is you have to manage both internal and external stakeholders. Normally, internal stakeholders, maybe your managers, maybe your team members. Then everyone should get a benefit by having. I'm not telling here benefit means only the financial benefit. Let's say if the project is functioning smoothly, then there are less rework. Then that will less reworks means that will give a benefit to the every team member as well as the organization. Then better allocation of resources. All the things are in the process in the better managing a project. Okay, I think with that I will conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, you can raise it now. I think I have covered a huge lot. If you have any questions, you can raise it now. Within 2 hours, it's very difficult to cover all these aspects, but better to go through these slides again. And I wish you all the best for the exam.
Is it presentation is available for us?
I think ISL will share with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So what kind of questions will be there in the paper?
I think you should refer to the March, maybe the December examination. It's both things will be there. That means that question will be have 2 parts. One is for some quality management aspects, and another one is the HSC aspects. Normally, you have to think about your organization and write some. Okay. I'm not asking the principles of total quality management, but when you are trying to write the quality management things, try to write down the basic elements, those kind of things. Whatever I explain to you, you can keep it in mind and try to write down for the during the exam.
Okay, thank you.
There's a design guideline also have a BS code and other things. That is it a different thing over the quality, or is it only design we consider about that?
No, actually that's the thing I explained. This quality management systems that it's let's say this BS guide, British standards, IEC standards, SLS standards, mainly for the product oriented activities. That means let's say just I will explain with the miniature circuit breaker. Then it will mention the IEC number. That means that miniature circuit breaker has to manufacture according to the IEC that particular standards. That means you have to select the equipments, then that characteristic, their behavior, then the testing of that particular batch. All the things should be carried out based on that particular IEC. But during the manufacturing process, you have to have a quality management systems to maintain the proper quality aspects during the process. Okay, normally these IEC, BS, SL standards mainly related to the products, but quality, let's say 5S or total quality management principles, those are generic things. That means you can apply in a total organization to maintain the overall quality of your processes. Okay. Thank you very much for your comment. Do you have any questions? Because I have to do another 3 lectures to you. This first time I am doing the international relations to you as well, because ISL requests me to do the international relations, but try to participate for the since these are in 2 sections. I can't remember the section, whether I think section 3 is health and safety management, OHS, quality management and health and safety subjects question will be there. National policy and Sri Lankan economy and international relations are in the section 2. Definitely you will get one question for the section 2. I don't know whether section 3, last year we ISL put us question on health and safety aspect. Hope you can B paper, past papers, you can get it from the ISL website. It is available. If you don't have the last time, most recent paper, okay, I can share. All the other papers, you can get it. This, according to my knowledge, this particular subject module was introduced from last session. Okay, then shall we stop? Any other questions? If you need any questions, I think my telephone number and the email address is there in my presentation. You can contact me, or otherwise you can send me a SMS, then I will contact you. Okay, but don't expect in detail questions in here, because no one is expert on the quality or the health and safety. I know. This is a brief introduction. Not don't learn these particular subjects only to pass the B paper. Try to adopt these concepts while you are working in your workplaces as well. Okay, then shall we stop? Then hope to meet you on my 0718357776. Okay, I have given my number and the email address to you. Okay, try to get the presentation from the ISL, and I think the recorded version also they are sharing with you. Okay, then hope to see you on 14th, and the 14th I will do the national policies, and maybe 16th I will do the Sri Lankan economy, and on 21st they have planned to do the international relations. Okay, good night. Thank you very much.
Good night, sir.
Thank you, sir.